Hey everyone, Yasin here, and today I'm doing some more marker sketching, and I thought I'd walk you through my thought process. So, this time I figured I would do some thumbnail sketches, and I would think about shape a bit, because in the video, I think 2 videos ago, I was talking about how to use appealing shapes, and I mentioned circles and triangles and rectangles or squares. And when I actually use them in sketching, it's not as obvious as that, although it could be. So for instance, if you look at the first guy I did, he's very much a masculine downward facing triangle or pointing triangle. And then for the girl beside, I think I sort of forgot about the shapes a bit, and I was doing, pointy hair and just a general thin, pointy feeling. And so for the guy after, I thought, okay, let's really go circly and remember shapes, because that was sort of the whole idea. And so you'll notice when I do circle shapes, they're also oval shapes, and there's variations on the theme. So it's where experimenting comes in, and where you don't have to just watch a tutorial and hear that someone says something and do exactly what they said, because there's room to be flexible. There's always room to be flexible and to adapt things. So here I'm doing a very rectangular shape, and I wasn't sure what it would be, but when you draw a lot, you get used to just seeing what works and what doesn't work. So, for instance, right now I'm adding in a bunch of internal shapes, and someone could say, well, how do you know what shapes to add and things? Like what I'm doing right now to the circly guy, right? I added that diagonal. It's like, how do you know to add that diagonal? Well, because after drawing a lot, you get to the point where it's like, this shape is boring, and I want to break it up. And if I break it up symmetrically, it's still going to be kind of boring. But if I break it up diagonally, that's going to have more interest. With the shoulder things that I just added for the middle guy, it's because I looked to the guy to his left, and I saw that, well, the shapes are very similar of these two. So let's break it up. Let's make this guy have bigger area up top at his shoulders. So now his shape is kind of an X shape, or maybe a Y shape if you break it down. And for the rectangular guy, I created a vertical rectangle, right? So then I want to push that. So I gave him this big sword hilt coming from behind. So basically it's a guy, and he's standing in front of his sword. And I don't know. But again, so my thought is very tall. Like, that's what I keep thinking. Tall, exaggerate that feeling. And now for this thing that I'm doing, I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to create something a little more organic. And so I would say the shape for this is still very round. I don't know if it comes across that way when you look at it, but when I'm drawing it, I see it almost like maybe a beetle, like some kind of bug shape. Although I'm treating it like, no, it's some kind of monster, and it's not exactly an insect, but in terms of the big shape, it feels like, yeah, you've got that curved back. And now I wanted to do more of a crescent moon shape. And again, I'm using my intuition, so I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm letting the marks make themselves. But again, it's more interesting when you have pushed things. For instance, you want something tall, then make it skinny and tall. If you want something wide, make it short and wide. Because if you make it tall, but it's wide, then it tends to be ambiguous again. And so when you look at skyscrapers, they're very tall, but they're also very skinny. And these things tend to go hand in hand. So if you have a character who's short, but you don't want them to look too short, make them skinnier, and then they'll automatically look taller. And vice versa, right? You want a big character, but you don't want them to feel really big. You could just make them more wide, and they'll just feel very bulky. So now I'm bringing out the black calligraphy pen, and I'm trying to find the shapes that are in this thing. And for that last crescent moon thing, it's a very... I don't know what it is. I don't know what I was drawing, really. It's more design. Just an idea of like, yeah, maybe this shape, maybe that shape. And that's the thing with drawing and being more free, is you have to be free to mistakes and things not turning out right. And it's still something I'm trying to get used to, because so many times I'll do these things. And I recorded the marker sketches. I have one more marker sketch video that I'll upload. But I recorded them all at the same time because the setup is kind of annoying, so I don't want to, keep having to set everything up. But yeah, so I record it and then time passes, and for me that's usually a bad thing, because when time passes I seem to dislike my work more and more, and then I look at it and it's like I don't think I should upload this anymore. And that was very much my thought. And then, I mean, it tends to work like this. In the beginning I think it's okay, and then the next day I think it's terrible, and then maybe a few days later it's like, yeah, okay, it's not so bad. Maybe it's not great, but it's not so bad. But anyway, so the video after this one, so next week's video, I'm actually going to be painting these thumbnails, not like super finished, but just to show, but not traditional painting, sorry, if anyone got their hopes up. It's just, I'll bring it into Photoshop and add some color so you can see what you can do with these kind of sketches. And for these thumbnails, I wouldn't say they're even like how I would do work, because there's no common design. It's just a bunch of different designs, and it's not really what you would do if you were working on a design. For instance, likely it would only be one of these characters that I would have as in a brief. So maybe like the one I'm working on right now, maybe it would be like warrior girl, kind of like a punk, and with a big sword, and then I would just do different variations of what that could be. And limitation can be good, especially when you're running out of ideas. If you don't feel like you have many good ideas, try giving yourself limitations and like narrow it down to something, even if you don't think it's a good idea, because as you narrow things down, your imagination is forced to wake up. Because if someone says draw anything, and this is often a problem I see, is when beginners are starting, they don't know what to draw, and they know they have to draw. So it's this thing of, what do I draw? And they tend to just draw anything, but it's all random and there's no direction. So then maybe they'll get into life drawing, because life drawing is, it gives you directions, like, oh, I just draw this, or I'm gonna do studies of what, maybe faces. I'm gonna do face studies, and that's okay, but I feel it's still better when you limit yourself and have more of a strict goal in mind. So one thing you can do is, if you really don't have any ideas, try interpreting a story. If you don't have your own story, just maybe a novel you like that doesn't have, like it hasn't been made into a movie or something, and then you could interpret what those characters look like, and then you have a big goal. For me, it's my graphic novel that I'm gonna finish in many years, likely, but it's giving me something to work on. So when I need to do a character, it's a character in that story, and because it's a character in that story, it has more to it than just I'm drawing a character. It's like I'm drawing this person, and oh, what is his job? What is his age? What are his characteristics, his features, things like that. They all come into play, and so I feel anyway you improve much faster. My friend Jet, he's working on a manga right now for, that's like his job, and he's talking about how much he's improving in things like perspective and composition, and how it was so difficult in the beginning and it got so much easier later on, or not even that much later on, like very quickly. And I remember when I was doing comics, it was the same thing. I really feel comics teach you so much because you have to know so much to do them, and it's very much a case of, for me anyway, it was a case of being overwhelmed and having to rise to the occasion. Whereas I think before I would tend to stick to my comfort zone, and that's not necessarily bad to stick to your comfort zone, especially in terms of, like, I'm starting to wonder if style, maybe I should stick to my comfort zone just in style, but then in subject matter I should be very broad. And so I think that might be a better idea, is to make sure your style is consistent but your subject matter is broad. But yeah, with comics and things, you're forced to do things you maybe wouldn't do, and it gives purpose to things. So now with this character, again, I really wasn't talking much about what I was drawing, so sorry about that. To bring it back to this character, I'm thinking tall again, right? So the head shape is very tall, very narrow. He has long hair because that accentuates the tallness, or the long, narrow feeling. And then I'm also thinking about variation. So I think very early on, especially maybe in schools and things, one of the tendencies is to be obsessed over symmetry. And I feel it's almost an immature type of desire to want symmetry, but I understand where it comes from. And it's that when you're starting, well, okay, this is a theory of where it comes from, but when you're starting out, it's so difficult to get symmetry, right? To draw one eye, and then maybe you drew the left eye, and then to have the right eye, and it looks like it's the same size, it belongs on the same face. And when you look at beginner tutorials, a lot of them are all about guidelines, and so you get a lot of symmetry, especially proportions and things, right? And symmetry is something that is difficult. Man, I made the one arm longer than the other or something. So you work at symmetry and you learn to almost admire symmetry too much. And what happens is, when you get a handle of symmetry but you still stick to symmetry, your designs can get kind of boring. And so variation, I feel, is the key. And it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if I'm just way off here, but it reminds me of taste, and how with kids, especially younger kids, the taste, your palate is very simple. So you would like maybe a sweet food, or a spicy food or a sour food, and then as you get older, you start to appreciate more subtle tastes, or tastes that are slightly spicy but a bit sweet, and maybe even a little bit bitter and things, and it just your palate expands. And I feel it's the same way with art and symmetrical designs compared to a little bit more skewed designs. Now in design, let's say I was designing a show, symmetry isn't necessarily bad, because oftentimes when you have a hero, for instance, having things symmetrical gives you a feeling of order and safety. And so symmetrical, like look at Batman or Superman or thing. Well, Superman has his S, so that's not exactly symmetrical, but he's pretty much symmetrical. You look at all these heroes and they're symmetrical. It's like, one side's the same as the other. And then with the villains, and this is more for Western art, but with the villains, they tend to be much more asymmetrical, because it's like, oh, there's imbalance and this is a bad thing, and so the asymmetry highlights how they are not to be trusted. But I think Japanese and other cultures didn't get so caught up in symmetry as much. And yeah, as I've just gotten older and I draw more, I tend to be much less symmetrical. But the key is to be balanced, and symmetry and balance are completely different things. Symmetry is, it looks the same on either side. Balance is, you're not going to fall over. So often if I have a design where, for instance, I have a bare shoulder on one side and then I have a big shoulder guard or whatever on the other side, shoulder pad, then maybe I would have a gauntlet on the side with the bare shoulder and a bare hand on the side with a big shoulder pad, so that it's balanced, right? And that's a very cliche example, but those are the kinds of thoughts that I have when I'm designing. For this guy, he was really tough, because I really wasn't sure what I was doing, and the crescent shape, it was, I don't know, it was feeling very ornate to me. So, I don't know. He felt somewhat mystical, which maybe it would have been more typical to apply that to a female character. But I thought, okay, whatever, apply it to a male character and see what it's like. And I can't say it was a success, but whatever. So now, see, with these shapes, I'm creating a bunch of like sheet shapes, and they're different shapes, but it's still following this big triangle, right? Like you can see this guy is pretty much pointy and triangular, and he's got some curves and some rectangle tall things, which is why I'm exaggerating the black so that you get this black shape that is tall. And then I'm adding these horizontal lines to add interest. So there's too much that is going up and down, then I have to break that up as well. So again, I don't think it's a good design, so I'm not saying, this is a good example of how to design. I'm just saying this is what's going through my head. Things like, oh, I need him to be taller. Oh no, it's too boring. Add more variation. So now I'm using a darker marker, and this is going to allow me to, again, get a lot more variation, because now I can break up shapes into colors or values. Like, it's going to be values, but when I color it, then all these can be turned into colors. And I'm also keeping in mind that I want areas of detail and areas of rest. And Mark Brunet talks about this a lot in his Blue Flay. In his videos, he talks about, I think he goes by 70-30, or maybe he goes by 80-20. But it's basically, let's say you had a piece of paper, that's 100%. Well, you would put detail in only 20% of it and let 80% be not detailed, so it gives your eye an area of focus and then an area of rest. And yeah, I'm not sure if he uses 80-20 or 70-30. I think for me, I didn't learn it as 80-20 or any kind of ratio. I just started, because I figured it out a while back, but it was just this thing of more negative space to the positive space. So have a little bit of positive space and a lot more negative space. And for people who don't know what positive space and negative space is, positive space is whatever you're looking at, that is the subject, and negative space is what is around the subject. So those can change. It's just arbitrary. It's not important that, like, oh, this is definitely the positive space, because it's like, well, for now. So if you had a landscape, then usually the sky is negative space, the ground is positive space. But then if you're drawing the sky and in the sky are clouds, the clouds are positive space. Now the rest of the sky is negative space, or it can keep switching. So, you know, try not to, I don't know, get too confused into that. So anyway, that's it, and hope it helped, and thanks for watching.